There's been a lot of back and forth in the Arknights Endfield community about the Gacha system that Enfield had in its closed beta test. To us coming from Arknights, you might be confused at the outrage and the concern that's been circling around the community. And if you're coming from outside of Arknights, you might be thinking that half the community is insane for being happy with a system that you see as very unforgiving. However, I think there's something both sides are missing, and I'll get to that later on. But first of all, how does the Enfield Gacha system work? If you were there for my last video where I went through how Arknights banner system and Gacha system work, you would know how complicated Hypergriff likes to make the Gacha, and in Enfield they did not disappoint in that regard. Also, there are some corrections, now we know how the weapons banner works, so let's get started. To pull on a character's banner, you either have to spend 500 of the Gacha currency called Oro Barrel, or one headhunting ticket. And that will either give you a 4-star, 5-star, or 6-star character if you're very lucky with your one pull. And of course you have a 91.2% chance of getting a 4-star, 8% of a 5-star, and then 0.8% to get your 6-star character. You're guaranteed a 5-star every 10 pulls and a 6-star every 80, which sounds terrible, right? But here's the catch. At 65 pity, 65 pulls deep, every pull from then on increases your chance of getting the 6-star by 5%, and that point is often referred to as soft pity in the Gacha community. So chances are you're gonna pull a 6-star before 80, or often referred to as hard pity. Aracon, I hear many of you ask. You said you're guaranteed to pull a 6-star, but you never mentioned the chances of pulling the rate up 6-star that's featured. You know, the one you want to pull. And that's, my friends, where it gets really complicated. Alright, let's go back to where you used your tickets, you used your pulls, and you pull a 6-star. There's a 50% that it is the featured rate of character, and a 50% chance it's a random 6-star from previous 6-star characters that have come out in the standard pool. For people coming from Hoyoverse games or like Wuthering Waves, this sounds pretty familiar, right? However, this is where all the similarities end, since guarantee for the 6-star is not tied to your 50-50 losses, but instead it's tied to the amount of pulls you've accumulated on that specific banner. You're only guaranteed to get the featured 6-star operator if you spent over 120 pulls on that banner. There is a second catch too. This guarantee count is different from your pity and does not carry over to the next banner. So if you do 40 pulls on a banner and then the next banner comes, you only have 40 more pulls until the 50-50 and your next 6-star, but you have 120 until the guarantee. Also, the guarantee is only once per banner, so if you want to pull multiple copies of the character, then good luck, be out of any guarantees. With the weapon banner, it works different than what we're used to. Technically it has 40 pity, and you can only do 10 pulls on it, which cost 2,980 of the weapon banner currency called Arsenal tickets. And if that wasn't confusing enough, the pity system is even more strange. So as we said, the hard pity for the banner is 40, but at 40 pulls you only have a 25% chance of getting your desired 6-star weapon and a 75% chance of not getting it, and you get a random 6-star weapon instead, with the guarantee basically being at 80 pulls. So in terms of how it works, it's a guaranteed weapon banner at 80 pity with a chance of getting the weapon early at 40. Now this sounds terrible, right? On its own, I would agree. But Enfield is different from other Gacha games in a way that makes all these negatives kind of irrelevant or even a positive. Let me explain. So let's go back to the weapon banner. As I said before, it's basically just 80 pity guaranteed weapon banner like Wuthering Waves, with a modest chance of getting the weapon you want early at 40 pity. So it's basically like Wua, right? Wrong. Having a 25-75 at 40 pity means you're getting 2 6-star weapons at least every 80 pulls. And even if it's not your preferred weapon, it means in the long term you're gonna have easy access to 6-star options for your 5 and 4-star operators. And you will be pulling on that weapon banner frequently because it's practically free. Enfield has a weekly roguelike mode like Hollow Zero and ZZZ, and simulated universe in HSR called Algorithmic Memories, and that gives you 5,000 Arsenal tickets per week if you reach the weekly activity threshold. A 10 pull on the weapon banner costs you 2,980 Arsenal tickets, so every 5 weeks you're guaranteed to get 2 6-star weapons, with one of them guaranteed being the one you want. This is excluding other resources of Arsenal tickets, such as pulling on character banners or converting Orable directly into Arsenal tickets straight up. So in practice, the weapon banner is basically free, sort of like the Bangbu banner in ZZZ to some extent. So that's the weapon banner. What about the character banner, are you asking? How can you salvage that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's go back to getting a character. Now, 80 pity with a 50-50 is quite standard, nothing interesting here. However, if you don't get your character, then you only need 40-ish more pulls to guarantee them, rather than having to go all the way to pity again. As example for horror games, because they're quite popular, worst case scenario, you need to go to 160 pulls deep to get your character, give or take. While in Enfield it's only 120, so if you're lucky, you get a character early. But if you're like me and you tend to lose your 50-50s, then Enfield should give you an easier time. Another concern I see from people looking into the gacha system is that the 120 pull guarantee is only once per banner, so if you want to go for multiple copies of a character to make them much more powerful, then you're kinda screwed. And you would be right. But here's the thing, like in Arknights, copies of a character, or their potential, does not matter too much in Enfield. Majority of them are minor stat boosts, or slight upgrades to their passives, and it's certainly nothing game-breaking like Hu Tao Constellation 1, Haru Master's first Mindscape, Don Hung's Eidolon 2, or Camillea's second sequence. So unless you're a whale and you want to max out your waifu, then you're pretty good with just pulling the character once. And if this game is anything like Arknights, then you don't really need to pull every 6 star to clear the game, and the content often can be just cleared with the 5 and 4 stars with a bit of thinking and skill. Of course, the guaranteed not carrying over kinda sucks, but it's not as bad as some people think. If you plan your pulls and you save properly, then this does not affect you at all. In fact, you're probably gonna have an easier time getting the 6 stars you want with all the other perks and features. However, if you're that type of gacha player to quote-unquote build pity, then this system's going to be terrible for you, as you're never going to get a guarantee basically. And this is terrible for people like me who have a gambling addiction. Does it suck? Yeah. Do I hope it gets changed? Yeah, but will I be upset if it doesn't? No, because to completely bypass this issue, you just have to be more careful with how you spend your pulls and not gamble it away the minute you get 500 Aura Bill and you can do a 1 pull. As you've seen, Enfield has a very solid foundation for its gacha system. However, there are a lot of factors and variables that can take this good system and make it absolutely horrible. First of all, we don't know if there's going to be any changes to this banner system from this beta into potentially a next beta or even the game's release. The devs have been vocal about how everything in the closed beta is subject to change, and they've taken a lot of feedback after the CBT ended. So everything we're discussing right now could be completely irrelevant and outdated in the future. Secondly, we don't know how many pulls we're getting per patch, or if there's even a patch system, or how frequently new characters come out, how long do you have to save for them, how long do their banners last, if there's a limited banner system like in Arknights, like the Wisdal banner for example, or if there's collab characters with their different banners, with different pity and guarantee, if the standard pool gets frequently updated and expanded every time a new character comes out. There's just too many unknowns at this stage, and I definitely can't give you a complete answer. We would have to wait for the game to release until we can get a full judgment. I definitely feel like a lot of people in the community are jumping the gun too fast. We should definitely wait until the release before we even make any final judgment. Of course, this doesn't mean that we don't tell Hypergraph what we want and what we don't, of course. It's just that we look and understand the system we have at the moment before we give any criticism so we get the changes we want. If you enjoyed the video and what I had to say, make sure to like and sub. If you disagree with anything, then please let me know in the comments or join my Discord to have a discussion. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.